t'aime, Bruxelles, je t'aime. Tu m'as fait manquer, Bruxelles, je t'aime, Bruxelles, je t'aime. Tu m'as préféré, Bruxelles, je t'aime, Bruxelles, je t'aime.
Hello and welcome to Bruxelles, Je t'aime, Euronews' weekly talk show about the week in politics. On Brussels, my love, we touch on some of the stories under discussion across Europe and hear what's at stake for you and for the continent. I'm Maeve McMahon. Thanks for joining us for this edition, brought to you from the European Parliament in Strasbourg, where MEPs met for their final session almost before the summer recess. Coming up this week, temperatures were extremely high, and so were emotions. Climate activists flocked from all over the continent to protest outside the European Parliament. On the same week, the UN warned we just witnessed the hottest week on Earth. Also out with their placards, disgruntled farmers from all across the bloc saying yes to nature restoration, but no to the nature restoration law that was voted on this week in Strasbourg. And chips for Europe. The European Parliament gave their blessing to an EU Chips Act that would pump billions into research and production of semiconductors to wean us off our dependencies on Taiwan and China. To have any chance of survival in the world of tech, the EU needs these tiny metal circuits for phones, medical devices and solar panels to reduce geopolitical tensions and, of course, trade wars. We take a closer look with our guests this week: Mohammed Shaim, a Dutch MEP from the Socialists, Silvia Modig, Finnish MEP from the left, and Peter Liese, German MEP from the centre-right from the European People's Party. Lovely to see you all. How are you? How was your week?
Peter, you can start.
Yeah. How are you feeling, Peter?
Yeah, I have mixed emotions. You know, this nature restoration law, I really thought it's good to stop it and ask the Commission to do something better, because people feel, especially in rural areas, we are asking too much from them. And it would be good to have a clear symbol that we listen to them. But on the other hand, the outcome of the vote, you know, is not so bad. It has nothing to do with the proposal of Frans Timmermans.
Peter Liese, let's elaborate in just a minute, but I want to explain to our viewers why you had that nervous laughter right now and how dramatic that big vote was. There were so many votes and so many amendments on that nature restoration law. But before we hear more from you, let's just get our viewers up to speed, shall we? Ellie Laliberté has more.
After a long year of political wrangling, the nature restoration law survived a major hurdle this week. The law that aims to rehabilitate damaged nature across the EU passed with 336 votes in favor, 300 against, and 13 abstentions. The right-wing party had long opposed the law, claiming it's unrealistic. They say stakes are high for farmers, who would lose land, and industry, which fears economic shock. But the clock is running out. Over 6,000 scientists are begging politicians to act. In the EU, 80% of habitats and 60% of species are in poor conditions. This week's vote marks another lap for this long-awaited decision. But the question is, how strong is the text now?
Ellie Laliberté reporting for us there. So you both voted in favour after those 136 amendments in favour of the text. Are you pleased with the final weakened text? Mohammed, let's start with you.
I'm pleased because I think at the end of the day it's also about the signal. I mean, from the beginning of this whole charade, I didn't understand why the EPP walked away from the negotiation table, because I think they could have gotten what we voted for yesterday, and then they would be part of the negotiation team. Because at the end of the day, the most important thing, knowing that 80% of the habitats in the EU are not that good, in the Netherlands it's even 90%, to commit yourself to a target where you say somewhere in the future we will take restoration of nature seriously. I mean, I think it's a very important statement, and I think a well-needed statement. And now we have a text, because we did listen to the farmers, we did listen to industry. Already, I mean, many of those, I think, fair comments were included in the compromises. Then what I think is really cynical, I was listening to some colleagues of Peter Liese. were saying on camera that they even liked the text, and then they still voted against. That's
well, Peter
something
Lisa
that's a
just
bit
said
strange
that as
for
well
me.
earlier in the programme. But before you elaborate on that, Peter Lisa, let's just hear from the left. From
I am
Sylvia.
pleased that we got the text out, because the other option would have been that EPP would have succeeded in rejecting the whole law, which is a necessity for us if we want to achieve the Green Deal, because this is one of the foundations of the Green Deal. You cannot build a house without building a foundation for it. So that's how important this law is. So I'm very happy that the rejection failed, and we have a text which we will try to improve in the trialogues. But the text became a lot weaker. Significantly a lot weaker. The biggest problems there I see is that agriculture and peatlands are out from the Parliament's position. And this is extremely important. If we look at the peatlands, that's 3% of our agricultural land in Europe, but 25% of the emissions of our agriculture. So come on, it's common sense to try to tackle those parts where we can get the most for the less investment. So I'm very disappointed at that. But I have no clue on what the EPP position is, because they did not want to negotiate. They went out from the negotiations. Then they say afterwards that we wanted rejection all along. So you were not negotiating in good faith. You just wasted everybody's time.
We don't have Manfred Weber, your leader, around the table, but we have you, so we're delighted to have you. There was 21 rebels, I think, as well in your group that voted against the political line. You stuck with the line of the group and you voted against, but yet on our programme here today you're saying that actually it was so weak you might have voted another way?
No, I think it's very important, really, also for the audience. I have never in my many years here in Parliament experienced such a difference between the perception at home in my constituency, I come from a rural area, and the perception in the Brussels bubble. You know, in Brussels, 90% of the people think this is a good thing, it sounds good, and we need to do it. At home, 90% of my people, not only farmers, mayors, forest owners, people that have hydropower, they say, what are you doing here? You know, 80% of our nature is in bad circumstances. When I go with people in my constituency, they don't see this. And it's also a very shaky definition. What is a good circumstance and what is not? So I think we have a problem here. We have a problem with different perception. And we have, in fact, the problem that people rightly say, you are doing so much, you are asking so much from us, but you don't give us support. You know,
but it's interesting because we saw mayors from Eurocities were in favour of it. We saw as well 6,000 scientists were writing in favour, and we also saw big companies like
and do you know why the perception is so different? Do you know why the perception is so different? Because EPP has been spreading disinformation.
No.
You have been going against science. You say that this is a threat for our food security, when all the scientists say that the nature...
Sylvia, all of the scientists... All of the scientists?
No, not all.
So, please.
The vast majority of scientists. You know, Peter, very well that you are talking against science, against the scientific advice.
That's not true. That's not true. And I hope I have the opportunity to clarify this.
So food security is not relying on biodiversity. Oh, come on, Peter.
It is, of course.
That is taught in schools in the first grade.
But you cannot deny when you force farmers to do...
You don't force these obligations out of the member states, not on the farmers. This is another disinformation that you are spreading.
You know,
and
I just wanted to say something.
But it's worth, Peter Lisa, pointing out that the member states will also have to draft up their own plans. And I'd like to just bring in the young voices, because I mentioned earlier that climate activists, of course, from all across the continent, they travel by train here to Strasbourg to put pressure on you all and tell us what was at stake for the environment. And we had the opportunity to speak to one Belgian activist and also to the Swedish activist Greta Thunberg, who, of course, started the Friday for Future strikes back in 2018 and mobilised thousands of people all across the world.
One of our slogans is no nature, no future. And I think that tells it all pretty much. Like, all of our climate, all of our environmental ambition are not going to be achievable if we don't have a nature restoration law. But it's beyond that. It's actually food security that's at stake as well. It's Europe's resilience to massive climate events. And it's also farmers' livelihoods at the end of the day. So it affects us all. They keep asking for postponement for every environmental regulation. Let's do it later. Let's do it later. We have time. Clearly, the weather here today shows that we don't have time. We need to act now, but they're not willing to listen.
Our message to the politicians is to choose nature and choose people over profit and greed. If we don't protect nature, if we don't protect people, is that countless of people are going to lose their lives and livelihoods, and it's the natural world that is at stake.
Greta Thunberg there, she was also in the plenary as the vote came out, and she was a little bit disappointed, she said, because it was weakened. And you had the opportunity as well to speak with these activists. How did that go?
Unfortunately, Greta didn't have the time to speak to EPP. I don't know what happened. She was announced, but she didn't come. I spoke to these young people, and for me it's very important to make a difference between the Green Deal, our climate agenda, and this law. And there's many reasons for that. You know, to have renewable energy, to have hydropower, to have also hydrogen, we need space. And sometimes you have to decide. If we want to be industrialized, and I want us to be industrialized also in the future, because only then we are a good example, and to be climate neutral, sometimes you need to have compromises and not the last bird can avoid a wind farm and other important projects. And that's why I'm for the climate neutrality. And the second point, especially to my two friends, because we were together in the discussion on climate, on the ETS and on the Social Climate Fund. The ETS only gets such a big majority in the parliament because we also gave the money for the poor. Here we ask people to do something, but no answer where does the money come from to do all this.
But there will be money allocated.
The EPP amendments say that there should not be able to use agricultural funds.
The CAP money will not be used.
You have made yourself amendments which restrict using
I have other ideas. I have other ideas.
That's so contradictory, Peter. This is
where
crazy.
the money should come from.
Mohammed.
I have three comments that I would like to make. First of all, I respect Peter Liese, and of course Peter Liese has been a champion in the past, definitely on ETS, on climate, fighting for climate. I mean, I saw how hard he works. The complexity that I have here is that nature is part of the same medal. It's the other side. We need healthy ecosystems in order to get our Paris Agreement. And then when you say to me, in my rural area, 90% are against, they say nature is going well, you're a physician. You know, when you look at me, if people look at me, maybe most of them will say I'm healthy, but you're a physician. If you look inside, probably you will find all kinds of elements that are not okay. I mean, we need to listen to experts and not people looking at grasslands and say how nice greener they look like, hence it's going well with biodiversity. The last comment that I really want to make, if you go to people and tell them this is a bad law, over and over again, they of course believe that it's a bad law. I have seen elements taken out of context, put it on Twitter in the campaign of the EPP that were not on the table anymore. We've listened to farmers. The 10% landscaping of agricultural land was already deleted in the compromises in Envy. And still EPP was saying, we are going to take away your land. I mean, this is not something I would
And Mohammed, you were very brave. I saw you this week. Did you get up on stage and speak in front of the farmers?
Yeah, why not? I mean,
in front of hundreds of angry farmers. And we actually...
to the activists, he speaks to the
Yeah, and I think they were booing you, seriously booing you.
I think they were booing me at the end because I said nature restoration law, yes, nature restoration, yes. But before that, I was making some elements. I think people were really thinking, like, is he now for us or against us? I'm for farmers. We need more farmers in the EU.
Let's bring in a farmer, because we had the opportunity. We were also there among the crowds chatting to the farmers, and we spoke to one. He's a Danish man. Yeah. He's not just a farmer, he's also an MEP, and he despises this law. He tells us why.
I know a lot about nature. I know a lot of biodiversity because I live in that. And the proposal from the Commission, it's totally crazy because it will bring us back to 1952. It's the first time in the history where Parliament has been so divided in two blocks. So we must find a new road to nature restoration and biodiversity. I know what's happened on my ground. I know what's happened in my field. I know what's happening in my wetlands I have made. I know what's happened in my new forest. Came out and look.
Asger Christensen there, a Danish MEP, inviting us all, and activists as well, who were on the other side protesting, to visit his farm.
He made just a mistake there, which is not in the law. The law does not take us back 60, 70 years. If you have read the law, you know that it says that documented losses within the 70 years. And it's not the same thing as taking us back in time 70 years. That's ridiculous. And this is one of the disinformation EPP is giving out.
And even that reference is deleted in the compromise.
And that reference is
that's my
deleted
question.
in the
Who
compromise.
actually around here has read the whole law?
Yeah.
Who has read the whole law?
I did.
Yeah.
I did. And to be honest, it is true that some of the tweets that EPP people made are exaggerated. And
Thank you, Peter. I respect that
I told that internally. The worst
and
tweets,
you're not a climate denier, because you're going to ask me that.
But that's still online. The S&D group still has online calling me a climate denier, and Mohammed knows, and he said it here on record, that is not true. So I think that is also, no, that is not only exaggerated, it's fake news when you call me a climate denier.
True. Peter is not a climate denier. I know this for a fact. We have sat and negotiated the ETS, and you personally did a huge effort on that. But EPP is the one that has started this disinformation campaign. You can now say that.
But the most important question, did we read the law? The problem is that there's a big room for interpretation. The definition is not precise. The reference to the 70 years was in. And, you know, for example, forest owners tell me 70 years ago, we had different forests, but now we have a different climate. Regrettably, we need a forest also with species that are not originally from Europe, but they can cope with the climate. And that is one of the problems. The biggest problem is that everybody can interpret whatever he likes, and we will have problems when we don't have a stable definition. And I think that is the biggest weakness. We need to be clear what is coming and what is not coming. Maybe we can sort that out in the trilogue, but the base was really weak.
Do you know how we could have sorted out all of that? If you, EPP, had negotiated it
no, that's not true, Sylvia.
No, you negotiated. You said you want to negotiate. Afterwards, you said you wanted to reject.
And it's worth reminding.
We have made all these proposals, and the left and the socialists and the Greens said, don't even talk about these amendments.
No, that's not true. No,
you were not in that negotiation.
It's worth pointing out as well that this is just a step, a hurdle that was jumped. Of course, you mentioned trilogues. That means negotiations have to start between the member states and, of course, the European Parliament, the co-legislators. But I think the concerns as well of farmers is that they are feeling a little bit forced into something. Because we spoke to the Irish farmer, Pat McCormick, who heads the Irish Creamery Milk Suppliers. Take a listen to him.
Well, the critical word there is voluntary, to go back to it. You know, we're not against nature. We work with nature on a continuous basis, 24/7. And, you know, biodiversity, it's great to see it out there on the farmland and in the hedgerows. So to make that point very, very clear, I suppose the issue is the lack of the word voluntary in the script. And that's critical because, you know, that's the difference between imposing something on somebody and allowing somebody the opportunity to volunteer to enter a scheme.
So Pat McCormick there, worried, I think, of that word, the binding word, because, of course, we've plenty of paper on the table already, but it's not being implemented when it comes to nature and when it comes to bird life. A reaction to what he had to say there?
No, the biggest problem I have, I really sympathize with farmers. One of my first jobs when I was 15 years old was at a dairy farm. It's a beautiful job. Which is impossible to do on your own because you need to go big or you go broke as a farmer. The business models of European farmers is failing. The ones profiting of the decent hard work of farmers are big multinationals that they depend on. It's ridiculous that if you look at products like milk or potatoes, that the business case is negative for farmers, that they need subsidies to survive. And that's something that we really need to fix. And then I fully agree that it's not only a burden, you also give a perspective for farming, that if you go organic and you don't go as big as possible, that you can have a decent piece of income for you and your family, and you can live balanced with the ecosystem surrounding you. That's the model I'm fighting for, better income for farmers, but also better balance with the ecosystem.
And Sylvia, what about you, your message to Pat McCormick and other anxious farmers?
Well, I think one of the most regrettable things in this EPP's campaign is that they're trying to pit us against the farmers. Nobody is against the farmers here. The farmers' biggest threat is the loss of biodiversity, the depleting soil, which will end up in less crops. So strong biodiversity is better crops and better livelihood for the farmers. And I think Mohammed here spoke well. And all of what Mohammed said is that we are supporting by the whole CAP system, everything, the big agri-business, not the farmers. And this, if EPP wants to join forces to find ways to really help the farmers, I'm fully up to that because these people do an extremely important job.
So what about the future of your party, the EPP, a little bit divided now? I mean, have people still confidence in the leader?
We have a free mandate here. The Renew group, the Liberal group, was much more divided. I'm not afraid of the future of my party, and I'm also not in favor of a cooperation of my party with the far right. I never talked to the German AfD. Of course, I don't cooperate with them. We are in the center. But the problems that people in the center of the society saw with this law made us vote against.
Such as, I'm really curious, because I think all concerns are off the table, Peter. All the concerns, the agricultural land, the reference to 70 years ago. Come on, the non-deterioration.
Mohammed Shain, that is all we have time for, I'm afraid. That is all we have time for on this topic. We will come back to it as the negotiations kick off in a couple of months. But for now, don't you go anywhere, because after the break, we'll be telling you about the EU's obsession with chips, and not the ones we eat. Stay with us here on Euronews. Welcome back to Brussels, my love. I'm Maeve McMahon, and we're in Strasbourg this week, where MEPs sealed a deal on the so-called EU Chips Act, a Commission plan that was put on the table last year to increase semiconductor production capacity to 20% of the global market. The idea to boost production with €43 billion in private and public funding, reduce dependencies and address skills shortages. €3.3 billion will be pumped into R&D. These tiny chips, of course, are crucial to make everything in our modern world, from parts of electric cars to smartphones and to medical devices. So have you followed this news? What do you think of the plan? Will it put us on the map with Japan, China, the US?
I live a stone's throw away from the big factory of ASML. It's really my constituents, the southeast of the Netherlands, near Eindhoven. They're based in Veldhoven. Very, very big mega factory where they build the machines to produce chips. 20 years ago, our region also had the two biggest semiconductor producers in the world, but somehow we lost that capacity. Of course, 20 years ago, they were way smaller than they are today. I really believe that everything starts with a vision. I think we can get it done. And I know that everyone is criticizing that it's not enough or that we will probably fail, but it starts with an idea, it starts with a plan. We together with the private sector, I will try to set up these ecosystems. We need them also for geopolitical reasons. We have to start somewhere. Whether we will multiply the numbers in the coming years, that's something we have to see. Look at the Net Zero Industry Act, for example. But I'm very confident what we did yesterday, vote in favor of the European Chips Act, is a good step forward to this geopolitical independence.
Okay. What about you, Sylvia?
I was for the Chips Act. Of course, I do think we need it. I'm a little bit concerned about the environmental exemptions now in the compromise. But hopefully there is also still included the assessment on environmental and social impact. So hopefully that will take care of the problems. But to build facilities in Natura 2000 areas is quite questionable. But the COVID crisis showed us the weakness in our supply chain. It showed us, in my perspective, the weakness of global capitalism, and the geopolitical situation has made it even clearer and even worse. So we need to do this, and hopefully we can bring jobs back to Europe, and hopefully this will strengthen our resilience.
Yeah, the EU Commissioner said this week it was a historic decision after months of work. What's your take? What will it mean for Europe?
Yeah, I think it's really, really important for me as a medical doctor, especially when you talk about medical devices. When you can't buy a new car, it's bad for the economy. But when you can't buy a medical device that is life-saving, then it's really dangerous. I like the whole law, especially also the part that Sylvia doesn't like, because we need to make compromises. When we want to be independent from Taiwan and other areas, we must be prepared that there are problems in Taiwan, unfortunately. And then we need to do it at home, and we do compromises to get it done. And what is very important, I have also Infineon, a chips company in my constituency. They think their most important point is they want to get renewable energies for their chip production, to be independent, but also to show to the customers that they are sustainable. And that's very interesting. There was politicians in favor of renewable energy, citizens a bit reluctant, and industry also not really pushing. Now industry says we need the renewable energy to have a sustainable supply chain for our customers.
Well, this is, of course, a big deal for the German car industry. I was reading that hybrid electric cars need up to 3,500 chips per car. That is a lot of chips. But just to bring another view into the debate, I was chatting to Jacob Kierkegaard. He's from the German Marshall Fund, and he reckons that the Chips Act will have the desired effect. But he questions whether perhaps too much money is being spent. And in a couple of years, we could have too many microchips. Take a listen.
The global semiconductor market is heading for oversupply and a crash in prices, which will mean that, you give it a year or two and you will see that the chips makers who have been making a lot of money recently because prices were very high, they're going to start losing money, including the companies that took a lot of taxpayer money. So yes, it will, have the desired effect, but we're going to create a situation of oversupply and lower prices.
Kierkegaard there speaking to me earlier in Brussels. Does he have a point? Will we look back in a few years and think too much money was pumped into this?
I think to be independent is important. As I said, I'm a doctor. We see it in medicines, in pharmaceuticals at the moment, that we depend too much from China and India. And to be honest, it's good to have too many of these chips. It's much worse to have not enough.
Yeah.
And that's why I think this is not my biggest concern.
And from the left group, I mean, your take.
I agree with Peter Lees on this. I'd rather have too many than too little, because as Peter described, there are also the medical devices that depend on this. And there I would not play any risky game. So rather have too much than too little. And what I would want to see here more is more public investments, to have it publicly controlled. I think that would increase our resilience in the future.
Mohammed?
I think we are in a transition, going from one economic equilibrium to another one, which means that sometimes there are no optimal conditions for the market to work, which automatically means that if you want to fulfill those ideas and goals of the transition, that you need to take some risks, which means an oversupply could be possible, could be. If we don't have enough chips, we can have security problems, health problems, and I can go on and on and on. And those costs are too big, I think, to not go for this investment today.
And Mohammed, the other day, the Netherlands restricted sales of critical chips technologies to China. Do you think this is a direction that the rest of the continent should take?
I mean, in general, I think we have to assess a bit better who we share technology with and what that technology is used for. But I'm not in favor to already exclude countries from anything. We have to make the assessment first. Because at the same time, we are so dependent on some of these countries when it comes to our supply chain and many other fields, that if they would respond to that, we could get in a very problematic situation. So assess first and make very explicit conditions how that technology is used. And this is for every country.
Quick reaction, Peter?
No, I agree. We shouldn't be too risky in this operation. Prepare to be more independent. Yeah, but in Dutch, they say you don't throw away your old shoes before you have new. So let's do step by step.
Yeah, the new thing is we don't throw away our shoes at all. We just reuse them and give them a second life.
Okay.
Well, indeed, with all this talk of climate, it's all about recycling and upcycling and the circular economy. That is, I'm afraid, all we have time for on that topic of the chips. We will keep an eye on that. But for now, thank you so much to our panellists for being with us.
Thank you.
And thank you for tuning in. We see you soon here on Euronews and, of course, Euronews.com. Hello there, you're watching Brussels, My Love, Euronews' weekly talk show. I'm Maeve McMahon. Now, school's out for the summer, and not just for schoolgoers across the continent, but almost also for MEPs. And with all this talk about protecting the climate, we wanted to check if sustainable tourism was also a concern here, because according to Booking.com, it is very much on travellers' minds, but 50% think the sustainable options are still too expensive, but actually 50% are also willing to pay a little bit more for a sustainable experience. So the question is, too dear perhaps to go green? Is sustainable tourism something on your minds here?
Definitely. And it's crazy. If you think about, I went on my first Interrail when I was 18 years old. That's a long time ago. And the train system in Europe was better then than it is now. You had more night trains to choose from. You had better connections, faster connections to choose from. And it's incredible that we have gone so much back in this. And we
jump the train instead of all the reservations.
And now you have options where you look at, okay, I have this trip. This would take 13 hours by train and cost me 400 euros. Or I have the flight for 30 euros, 1.5 hours. You cannot blame anybody for choosing the flight in that circumstance.
And what about you, Peter? Will you be going on a sustainable holiday, or what are your holiday plans?
I always try, and the most important is, in fact, how you get to your place. And unfortunately, for a long time, aviation was cheaper than other modes of transport because we didn't have taxes and fees. This is about to change. I was also the rapporteur for that. Aviation is now in the ETS, and we will make them to pay 100% for their costs. The problem is that railway, in fact, had to carry 100% of the cost for years now because they use electricity. I fight it against this, and that will change. And that will be one part of a puzzle of many measures that will make train more attractive and to get us better trains. It's needed.
And Mohammed, I'll
right.
hear your holiday plans in just a minute, but first we wanted to get a couple of more views and find out what influenced people, whether it's Mother Earth or, of course, affordability. Our Rina Zubi went out to the streets of Brussels to talk to tourists.
Cheap. I don't have a lot of budget, so I really have to compare the prices.
Sometimes the cheap, sometimes the green. Before cheap, now I look green.
Personally, I would love to go green because I really like sustainability, and I actually plan to major in environmental science. But because of my family, we have to go the cheaper route.
I have some level of consciousness of it. It's not the highest priority, but it's something I try to take into account for sure. I did choose to travel by train rather than air travel once I'm here in Europe, and that was a conscious choice, knowing that was more green.
So most people, yeah, I mean, Mohammed,
the crazy thing is that usually people know your country better than you know yourself. We don't travel that much in our own countries. I'm absolutely sure that Peter has seen more places in the Netherlands than I have. It's a German thing. They love coming to the Netherlands, especially to the beaches. But, I mean, sustainable doesn't mean expensive, like, by definition. At the same time, I understand, you know, people want to travel. They have 20 holiday days in a year. And then, yeah, I can understand that they would love to sit somewhere at the Costa del Sol or any other place at the hotel enjoying with their family. So, and even if we would have a CO2 price of 200 euros per ton, you know, a plane ticket to the south of Spain would then increase by 50 euros and would then still be significantly cheaper than rail. So we need to make the alternatives way more cheaper, but we also should tell people once a year it's okay for you to have a vacation. And I understand that if the more polluting mean is the cheapest mean, I understand the decision that they take, yes.
Okay, and
yes.
to anyone going on vacation, I wish you a wonderful time, and also a nice break to you as well whenever you get it, as I'm afraid that is all we have time for. And thank you so much to you as well for watching us. If you want to reach out to us here at Brussels My Love, our email address is brusselsmylove@euronews.com. You can also catch us on social media. We're on Twitter and Instagram. Thanks for watching. See you soon here on Euronews and, of course, euronews.com.